Well, the godfather of this interpretation, this line of interpretation, is Leo Strauss, and we've been skirting around Strauss for the last 2 days, so I thought it might be time to actually inject him into the debate properly. Teaching at the University of Chicago for most of his career, he viewed the US as the instrument of a strong statist tradition. By that I mean it is a powerful state that should act aggressively in the world, and he advocated a vigorous American imperialism. Now, it's worth investigating his views because I'm going to try to make the case that he was deeply influential in one of the strands of American conservatism of the last 20 years. His views can be summed up as follows. Religion and faith, as representatives of moral absolutism, should be put back into politics, even though Strauss himself believed religion to be a pious fraud. It was useful to exert social control, but he himself was not a believer. Liberalism and moral relativism have to be rejected and replaced by some form of moral absolutism and a strategy of permanent confrontation with what is perceived as evil. So find the bad guys and always hit them hard. Strauss rejects individual rights in favour of state power. Your individual rights are really not that important to him. It's the power of America as a collective. Excuse me. He argues that classical and Christian natural law did not impose strict and absolute limits on state power, but that the exercise of such power was better left to the judgment of a wise statesman. And here we're moving into the Platonic reading that Strauss has, the idea of a philosopher king who will rule the state wisely. A strong central presidency would certainly express that. Strauss proposes for the United States a quote-unquote far-sighted imperialism and the adoption of militaristic policies. Go after the bad guys aggressively. And political philosophers, he argued, could lie to their readers for the sake of the greater social good. Now, that last position, that political philosophers, and presumably the politicians who are following their lead, could lie to their audience, is especially disturbing. This idea of the noble lie he explored further in Persecution and the Art of Writing, explaining that philosophers believed that the gulf separating the wise and the vulgar was a basic fact of human nature. There are those of us who know, and then there's you. We know, you don't, so we're going to run the world and you better like it. Don't worry, we'll give you pleasing fictions to make you feel as if you're participating in decision-making. Strauss told readers the vulgar were generally suspicious of philosophers, so philosophers had to employ subversive means, noble or just lies, pious frauds, and the economy of the truth. Now, okay, you may read this and think this is elitist bunk, it's nonsense, and you may say it's got nothing to do with actual political life, so what the hell are we worried about? You're right, it would have remained no more than the worst academic doublespeak or elitism, but for the fact that Strauss was read and cited as an influence by some conservative thinkers who felt an increasing revulsion from the 60s onwards in what they believed was the drift in American foreign policy abroad and cultural values at home. Their hero was President Reagan, fighting the Sandinistas, but their intellectual godfather was Leo Strauss. A number of leading neoconservatives, have quite openly acknowledged Strauss's influence. For example, William Crystal, the Vice President's Chief of Staff from 1988 to 1992, has written as much, stating, for Strauss, liberalism produced a decent way of life, and one that he thought was worth defending, but a dead end where nothing could be said to be true. One had no guidance on how to live, everything was relative. Strauss suggested that maybe we didn't have to just sit there and accept that that was our fate. Politics could help shape the way people live, teach them some good lessons about living decent and noble human lives. And can we think about what cultures and what politics, what social orders produce more admirable human beings? I mean, the whole question was put back on the table by Strauss, I think. Conservative policymakers took up this confident notion that America represented the preeminent moral force in the modern world, and that moral superiority constituted a mandate to act internationally. One of them was Ronald Reagan's advisor, Jack Wheeler, who has stated, it was a small group of people. This is a radio transcript, by the way. You'll see why I point that out in a moment. It was a small group of people, and yes, we did have a plan. Everyone thinks, oh, the Reagan doctrine, the Reagan administration, like everybody was for it. No, it was a small cabal within the Reagan White House that really pulled this off. His Freudian slip, not mine. Okay? What united this small group of ours was the vision of bringing more freedom to the world, more security to the world, to actually get rid of the Soviet Union itself. As a result, supporting the freedom fighters became the premier cause for the entire conservative movement during the Reagan years. If one follows both the writings and the oral pronouncements of the leading neoconservative thinkers, one consistently finds echoes of Strauss's worldview. Consider, for example, Michael Ledine's summary of Why We Fight. We want, you know, downward tyranny. We want free countries. We think that America is better off if we live in a world primarily populated with free countries who have to appeal to their own people for the source of their power and to ratify their decisions. And we think that if the whole world were like that, then we would be much more secure, and that typically we were attacked by tyrants. I think it's America's destiny, because I think that America is always going to come under attack from tyrants. So I think that our only chance is whether we're going to win or lose, and when we will fight and under what circumstances, but that we're going to have to fight, that's automatic, because they're going to come after us. Neoconservatives have been very clear about attributing their inspiration to Strauss. These are not abstract notions from Philosophy 101 taught down the hall there. These are people reading, the people reading these ideas are the men who proceeded from this ethical position to policy. Where's the transition? Well, look again at William Crystal's writings. The wisdom of regime change, the merits of promoting democracy, the desirability of American power and influence, these issues extend well beyond Iraq. So we dare to hope that this work will prove useful even after Baghdad is finally free. Surely it's not too much to claim that the ideological underpinning for the war in Iraq, and more generally for the entire thrust of the Bush administration's foreign policy, bore the unmistakable mark of 2 generations of conservative thinking that was attempting to put Leo Strauss's reading of Thucydides and Plato into action. And while American policy has been shaped by Strauss's ideas, the tragedy of it is that it lends itself to a fundamentally undemocratic elitism, since it is based on the spurious notion that only a select few, those of us up here, can ever really understand the secret wisdom of the intelligentsia, while the rest of you can just spend your time at the mall. America is a powerful nation, but it cannot be a great nation if it relies on the false proposition that because it enjoys a sense of moral purpose, that it is therefore obliged or entitled to project its military might abroad. The really profound tragedy of the neoconservative reading of Thucydides is that they didn't read him closely enough. Had they done so, they might have seen that an aggressive militarized foreign policy costs lives and does not increase security. The lesson for the president, therefore, is either read the classics a lot more carefully than the conservatives have done, or better still, don't read, lead. That's it. Now, we've had a slight change of format for the afternoon, since Gleaves is actually feeling a little unwell, and so we've moved the order around a little bit.